Welcome, soul driven writers, to the Soul Writer Podcast. This podcast is designed for writers like you who have a burning desire to share their story and message with the world and make the biggest impact possible. I'm your host, Lauren Eckhardt, bestselling author, ghostwriter, book coach, and the CEO of Burning Soul Collective. Here at the Soul Writer Podcast, we believe in the power of vulnerability and authenticity. Our mission is to inspire and empower you to write from the depths of your soul by showcasing other authors who have done exactly that. Through their journeys, you'll discover what it takes to write a book that truly resonates with readers and learn how you can embrace your own unique voice to live the writer's life that you've always imagined. So, gather your favorite writing tools, cozy up in your favorite spot, and let's explore the world of soul-driven writing together. This is the Soul Writer Podcast, where your passion meets purpose and the world awaits the magic that only you can create. Welcome to the journey. In today's episode of the Soul Writer Podcast, I interview Mae Wagner, who is a strong advocate of women, community, and connection. She is also the author of her memoir, Girls, Assassins, and Other Bad Ideas. In today's episode, Mae and I really break down what it takes to write a memoir and how it feels throughout the process, but also the goal, especially when you have a goal of creating a community of women where you can share those stories and create deeper connections with one another. So if you've thought about sharing your story and writing a memoir, this is the episode you want to listen to. Mae, thank you so much for joining us today for the Solar Rider podcast. I am thrilled to have you here. I would love for you to just tell our audience a little bit about you and your book that you have released.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, by the way. I always like to hang out with you. You're one of my favorite people. Um,
Oh,
my name is Mae Wagner, and I just published a memoir. It's titled Girls, Assassins, and Other Bad Ideas. And
what would you say the book is about? Like, who's it really for as well?
I think that it is meant for women who have endured some form of grief, loss, or trauma, which feels really general, but on this side of things, having talked to so many who have read it, I I find that is accurate because it's so many different levels of trauma, even not tied to the kinds of traumas I went through. They still took from it and pulled from it. So yeah, as general as it sounds, women who have experienced grief, loss, or trauma.
Yeah. I love what you just said there too, because I feel like a lot of people don't recognize that when they are sharing any part of their story or life journey at all. Sometimes they're like, oh, they feel like they're the only ones who have gone through it. And it's not necessarily about, even if you're the only person in the world to go through something, it's about how we all connect because of the emotions, right? Like that's how we can relate. It doesn't have to be the same exact situation to be able to touch someone's heart, but we all come together and just the beauty of life, being a human based off of our emotions and how we feel as a result of situations in our life. So I love that you said that, so many other people have connected with it, even if they didn't go through the same exact
Yeah,
thing.
that's the power of story. That's why we love movies and TV and books because we don't experience those things that are on the screen in front of us, or like the fantasy novels that people read. We aren't experiencing pirates and swashbuckling and dragons, but there's still something there in the framework of the story that draws us in because we relate.
Yeah, absolutely. So when did this idea of writing your memoir first come to your heart?
I knew from very early on that, like, we're talking adolescence, that I was going to write at some point a book about the harder things that I had gone through. And I kept just kind of pushing it off and pushing it off, which for good reason. I wasn't ready. No one wants to read the memoir of a 17-year-old or a 24-year-old. Um, so it just was always this one day I'm going to do it, one day I'm going to do it. And then people around me were, whoa, sure you are. Sure you are. One day you're going to write that book. But I just had to know in alignment when it was time. And then I don't know. I pieced together little essays here and there and just knew like someday it's going to be something, but right now isn't the time. So I'll just put them out when I can. And then the pandemic hit and I thought, well, now seems like a good time to start getting them all together. So Yeah, and it turned out I had a book.
Amazing when you start piecing together things that have been there,
Right.
right? Like that's one of the biggest pieces of advice I give people when they start off writing. Like, look at what you already have, even in the form of social media posts or journal entries or anything. You probably have a better start than what you
Yeah,
realize. It's not just a blank
yeah,
page.
absolutely. Because you're you. And if you're authentic across all of your platforms and hard drives, you're there and it's there, whatever you need. So
Yes.
absolutely.
Now, when you first had this thought in your adolescence that you wanted to share some of your stories and things that you had gone through, did you see it then too as being a memoir, or did you maybe even envision in fiction,
No,
or have you ever thought about it
I
as
knew that it
a
would be an autobiography. Um, but I didn't really know why or how, but I always knew that that was going to happen. I think that it's like we reach this point in adulthood where you stand there and you look back at everything you've done and you just see this linear tree that has just bloomed and blossomed from the root of things, and it all is tied to the same thing. And so I can sit here now and see, like, oh, this literally encompasses everything I've ever done with my life, which my focus in various different ways has always been to, connect with women, connect with uh, primarily women in a deeper way, at a deeper level where we're talking about real substantial things and addressing, just traumatic things or what have you, even well, long before that was a trendy thing to talk. Um, and I just all along the way never really understood what was going to happen. And then now I sit here and I'm like, oh no, the book like does all of that. It all does that.
it all came together without you necessarily setting the blueprint to do that,
Right.
right? It was just, would you say trusting yourself, or what
I
was the
think
process
so. I
like
think
for you?
that they're just we have the opportunity to come, not everybody does it, obviously, but we have the opportunity multiple times in our lives to come to this point where we just kind of surrender and follow whatever is unfolding in front of us. And that really is the best way to do it because it's less stressful.
Now, I mean, when you talked too about bringing pieces of previous work together, I mean, what form were those in for you? What did your previous work, your essays that you talked about, were those things that you shared individually, or were they all things that you just wrote for you?
I wrote them, I believe, to use as a base of one day this will somehow form like notes for my book or what have you. And um it just didn't, I don't know, they just sat there. And when I started going through them, I would realize that I would have this like the same topic of essay or the same story written out like 8 different times because there was no rhyme or reason. I just would be like, oh, I need to get out the story so that one day it can go in my book. So I'd sit down and do it, but I'd already done it 7 times. So yeah, it was delightful. And a lot of it's not the way I'd recommend writing a book, I think.
Now, when you were writing these individual essays, were you already thinking about them in terms of someone's going to read them someday? Or did they still feel very much just writing for you in those moments?
That someone was going to read them or at least read something in like based from them, whether I used them as like inspiration or notes or pieced them out for something. It was definitely with the intention of, okay, this particular story or memory or focus is something that I know people will read as.
Do you feel like you have to battle against the filter that's automatically there, or do you just feel so open and comfortable sharing any parts of yourself?
Um, I think for a while, a good long chunk of time, because again, like this whole idea of someday I'm going to do this spanned my almost my entire life. For a long time, I felt like I had to protect people, and so there was like this unprocessed filter that I didn't realize was there. Like I didn't realize that I was filtering anything. I was just protecting people in the things that I would write and or the ideas that I would have, and then I don't know, just through life and healing my own garbage and just really realizing, who really is in your corner and all of the weird little Pinteresty cliche things we see about, you know, if they're not in your standing by you during the low times, they're not going to be there supporting you in the high times. And all of those little things just began to just kind of inch their way in. And I realized like, okay, this is mine. And the only person I really considered was I talked to my husband and said, hey, how do you feel about me sharing these particular stories that don't involve you or that might reflect a negative light on you. And he, we talked about that and talked through that. And um, otherwise, I didn't care.
How do you separate yourself? Like if someone came to you and they were like, I really want to write a book exactly with the same vulnerability that you put out through yours, but I'm scared to death of the reaction from other people reading this. Do you have any bits of advice, things that you worked through and part of that healing of yourself, or just even the mindset that you had to take on before releasing like this?
Yeah, I think that, you know, we have to come to a point where we're okay and where we feel okay and peace about things and realize like if you're sharing something that someone did that hurt you or caused a complication in your life, that's on them. That's theirs to carry and deal with. And we have the options, we really have three options. We can forgive it and forget about it. We can use it authentically to put our story out there if it is part of our story and it's relevant. Or we can just keep it buried inside and let it fester and get infected and we grow resentment. Like those are really the only options. And so if somebody, and that's the point I'm at, like there are definitely people who could be offended by things that are in my book. And I'm like, well, that's on you because this is what happened and this is my experience and this is how it worked for me, and I'm okay. I'm okay. And if you're embarrassed that people are reading this story or it brings about negative feelings for you, then you should probably explore that and maybe see someone about it because that's not on me. I just told my story and people should behave better.
I mean, that shows so much emotional maturity as well, growth and being able to handle that. I mean, like that's such a good example of the way you need to be about most
Mhm.
things in life, let alone sharing your story like this. I love that. Did you have anybody come back after it was published and make any sort of comments or things that they weren't happy that you shared?
No. I have had I have family members who won't read it. And again, that's on them. Like they know, like it's not gonna make them feel good and that's okay. Um, and so there are definite people that have really avoided it out of, I think, their own fear and nervousness, and that's their journey. Um, but it was a weird thing to realize. Like I've been really open for a long time. I've blogged for years and have always just, I've spoken and I've always just been really candid and upfront and honest about things because first of all, I'm an Enneagram 4. And so that's just what I am. But also like it's just really important to me. That's what I expect from other people. So that's what I put out there. But it was really interesting after I wrote my book because then when, big things kind of blew up in my life a couple of months after the book came out, I just kind of sat there and thought, oh, so I have a bunch of people reading about my book with leading them to believe this is how my life is. And now it is clearly not quite like that. And so then I realized that I had kind of backed myself into a corner where I had the responsibility to be honest about it and say, hey, so here's the update no one asked for. This is what's going on. And I'm still going to continue being honest. And that was, I think, the weirdest part of all of it, not sharing the life stories that I've already had time to process and heal through, but realizing like, okay, I've opened myself up to people who care and read and are paying attention. And in order to keep that story authentic, I have to say, and then this is what happened. And so yeah, that's the only part that was a little odd to navigate, especially in this time of like oversharing on social media and stuff. It was really a strange place to be.
I think that's what's so nice about following you is that I feel like you do a really great job at finding that balance, where it doesn't feel like oversharing. It just feels like that authentic part of your journey and you're allowing people to be a part of that with you. What I really love too about what you said is that it's actually one of the biggest hesitations people have with writing a memoir is they're like, well, what if things are going to be different? Like, how does this end? My life's not done yet. It's like, well, yes, you can't write a memoir once you're dead. So you do have to pick a point in life that you feel comfortable ending a memoir in. but also knowing that it doesn't mean that it's going to lock you into who you were in that time or what was going on, right? Like I think it's knowing that it's okay for your life to change after the memoir has been written.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen it. Like most of us, have been exposed to like Glennon Doyle's work or Jen Hatmaker's work or Shauna Nequist. And like they all write these very personal, very raw stories, and then their lives change. And it doesn't make what they worked on before insignificant. It just shows growth. And we all need that. We all need to see examples of powerful women embracing their truths and still adapting because, we're not dead. You're right. And so thank God this isn't the end of the road for me. And I'm still going to grow and change, and who knows what will happen. And it doesn't cancel out what I've written. It just creates a path of, hey, this was my journey.
So, what has that path fully looked like? I mean, on the other side, as far as now hearing from people who have read your book, I know you've mentioned a few things, but do you have any sort of specific stories or things that come to mind that you want to share?
That's my favorite thing. That is, I had no idea how good that would feel. I love getting contacted from people, which women, it has happened more than I would have expected. One in particular was a couple months ago, and she said, I grew up like 7 miles from the group home you lived in. And I was reading that, and it shocked me knowing, this was going on practically in my backyard. And I had no idea that this place was like that, and this place was there. And even though I don't have the same experience as you, I felt so much of myself in my own adolescent journey through your story, and I just needed to reach out to you. And I really appreciated that because because it's your mission too. Like it's a big world out there, but when we share our stories, it gets smaller and more manageable because we connect. And that's the whole point of everything is connecting.
Absolutely. And it's always incredible too to think in terms of just the people who take that extra effort to reach out to you versus those who read your book. They were impacted, but maybe just never did that extra effort of reaching out, and just knowing that that exists all throughout is incredible. It's absolutely incredible. What would you say is, now that this is really the first big movement in being an author, what is your ultimate vision?
Thankfully, I feel like that hasn't changed too much, which makes me happy. I really want to join the ranks of the women who share their stories, walk through hard things with other women, um, just continue evolving and sharing that and growing community, like whether that looks like speaking or just retreats, all of it, like it all is under the same umbrella, and it all just makes me really geek out about the possibilities and what's down the road. And yeah, I love it. I love it all. I want to see big things and just embrace and manifest those big things because clearly there's a need. Like all you have to do is spend 5 minutes on the internet to realize that there are needs out there. There are things that really create opportunities for us to impact people just by being authentic.
What do you feel like when you see certain needs? What ends up speaking to your heart specifically the most? What kind of gets that fire lit for you to do bigger and greater things and reach more
I think
people?
just the lack of connection that is really the most neon thing for me. And like we were talking about oversharing on social media, like that's the whole point, right? The people are on Facebook oversharing absolutely everything because all they want is for someone to reach out and say, look, I really care about what's happening to you and I want to connect with you. But even then, until they've worked through their own stuff, that's not going to matter. Like that connection is a feeling of connecting with other people, but it's also this healing thing that happens within us when we're able to genuinely connect with others. And, so many of us don't know our neighbors. We don't live in communities that function as a community is designed to function. And we rely on government programs or what have you when we are all capable of meeting the needs of our community, but we're not doing it. We just are holed up in our homes, binge watching Netflix and just not connecting, just continuing to disconnect from everything that feeds us. And that's kind of, yeah, that's kind of the whole point, I think, is just, at least for me, is I really want to connect with people in such a life sustaining way, not because I believe that I have something to give them, but because just the process of genuinely connecting and being honest with people navigate the hard the hard things naturally. It just happens naturally and we can get through things we never thought we could get through because we've done that work.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, what would you say are the action steps that you take in your own life to make that better, to achieve more community
Yeah,
aspect?
learning for sure. Learning, striving to not have my world look like me is another really big one that I had never really realized for a long time. But I want to connect, um, and just get to know all sorts of women, different types of, you know, everything. Just to know, like, okay, there is enough reason for me to be motivated to learn about you and your culture or life or lifestyle or interests or what have you, simply because I'm a human and you're a human, and that makes you worth that time and investment. And just trying to be aware of the needs in our community and what people are going through, and then just empathy, realizing that this isn't, like my neighbor owns a cemetery and they're fairly new to it. They've only done it for a couple of years. And things I had never thought about before is the heartbreak that goes into that on a daily basis and the weird, like, psychological things that may come up out of that because our thoughts are always going to be focused on these horrible things that are happening. And just knowing, like, being more aware of that, being more considerate, realizing, like, I've never thought about this before, but now I know. And so here is what I can do for you. Here's how I can help when you need it and be thoughtful for you. And I just think that we all have so many opportunities to do those kinds of things and just be aware and pay attention and educate ourselves.
So everything you're talking about, I think, not only makes the world better, it makes us as humans better, and it also makes us better as writers because you really hit on some of those key words with being more aware, paying more attention to people who aren't like us, and really learning and seizing those opportunities. And that's what can, really just strengthen your writing, strengthen your perspective that you are approaching your writing with. And, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, allows you to see things from different angles. That makes it more powerful.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you have a second book brewing in you?
I do. I feel like I have 9 different books brewing in me. Um,
All nonfiction or fiction? Are you going to dive
I
into the
have
fiction
written a
as well?
novel already, and it was like a real life inspired novel that I wrote a long time ago, and I thought that I would naturally flow into rewriting that after my memoir was out. I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back, and it all honestly would be a great segue into, because my memoir is really focused on the women in my family, and this book is their stories, but fictionalized. And so I was like, it would be such a great segue, but it makes a lot of sense, but it hasn't felt. And I even thought, well, it's because I need to reread it and do it. And so I read it and I started, like, reworking it, and it just still didn't feel like this is where I'm supposed to be right now. So
Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I feel like that varies for a lot of people. And I know, again, many writers who are starting out, they don't know how to trust those voices, what they're hearing, especially those that have a lot of ideas and they're like, I don't know which one to start with. Like, how do I know? Can you talk about what it feels like for you
yeah,
to
I
know?
think that, like, I'm a metaphorical thinker. And so I think that, like, you're hungry, right? You're hungry, you haven't eaten since breakfast. It's like 2 in the afternoon, and you have the option to make a quick salad or use take leftover roasted vegetables. And like, as you think of that, there's a part of your body and your mind that is like, yes, that sounds nurturing. Yes, that sounds fulfilling. But then you're like, that sounds like a lot of work. And I have this granola bar right here that will take care of the hunger right away. And even as you're eating it, you're just like, This is okay. And I think that's what it feels like.
That's so good.
Yeah, there's this, it just feels like, inside of you, listen to yourself. You're like, this is the right thing, or, ugh, I'll do this, but it's not what I want to do. And almost always like that, ugh, it's not what I want to do option really isn't going to pan out great. And you're not going to
Nope.
feel
Yeah.
fulfilled, and it becomes more of a chore than a passion. And I think that writing is hard and there's a lot of chores that come with it, but that passion has to stay. That flame has to be lit.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think a lot of it too, you have to honor the season of life you're in and even some of the dates that you're in and just really listen into that. I used to always like struggle, like, how can they read two books at once? How can they write more than one book at once? But then once you get into it, you realize why and how to do it because it speaks to different parts of yourself in different moments when you need it the most. Like I've even noticed right now I'm writing, one fiction and then my memoir. And the memoir I love to do in the morning, can't do it at night. Night fiction speaks to me
Interesting.
more. And I'm like, that's just what I have to do. Yeah. And it's not like that all the time. Summertime, it switches. I like the memoir, but it's all about listening and experiencing it and realizing that it's all okay. But really, I think the goal always is that to have a goal with your writing. Like if you know without a doubt that you want to publish a book, you need to put that goal in front of you. And you need to have a game plan of what you're going to do to achieve it. So it's just not there ordained. What does that look like for you? I mean, when you knew that you wanted this book to be done, did you set like a certain timeline or specific goals for yourself?
There was no, it was that lofty one day this is going to happen kind of thing. And I did all the things that I thought I was supposed to do, queried, did the book proposal, did all of the things, and just started to feel like this isn't going to happen. This isn't going to happen because I realized I just was kind of flightless. There wasn't a specific goal. It was too vague because I had this fear that if I did a specific goal and then I didn't reach it, I was going to fail and the whole thing would just be a gigantic waste of time. And, everyone who had spent like the past 30 years going, yeah, sure, you're going to write a book would be, like, we knew you wouldn't do it. And so, um, it wasn't until, another author that you had published, I read her book for my book proposal as a call title and talked to her, and she kept saying, oh, you should connect with Lauren. You should connect with Lauren. And I was like, okay, still like just flightless and, had been querying and everything. And then after I talked to you, I was like, okay, this is the first time that I have a goal. I don't know how it's going to happen, but my book needs to be published through Burning Soul. Like that just is the way that it is. And that's just how it's going to happen. And somehow it's going to happen. And until then, I'm just going to stay in my lane and do what I need to do. And I didn't realize how freeing having the actual definitive goal would be.
Oh, that's huge. Yes. Because you have to feel like you're headed somewhere. You can't just be wandering around aimless all the time.
Right. It's not
So
protection
it
when you
helps with-
think like, I'm just not going to narrow it down because I'm protecting myself. It's not protection.
Yeah. I think you had a huge, huge topic. And that is the whole, once you start moving all of the excuses out of the way and really boiling down to what's happening, for many of us, there is some variation of fear preventing us from doing what we feel called to do, what's on our heart to do. And a lot of times what I love about writing a book is that I feel like it opens the door or even opens a window for many people to see what part of their actual purpose here is in this world. Like what do you actually want to do? And you already kind of knew yours. You knew already the people that you love to be able to connect with and how big connection was to you and be able to help each other and support each other. But for a lot of people, they don't see it until they start to write in something that lights them up and they're like, okay, I want to do more with this. And reason why we don't is because we know we're about to step into something that is totally outside of our comfort zone. But it's truly the next level that we need to be able to reach for any sort of sense of true fulfillment of how we're living.
Yeah. Yeah. What is it? You ask yourself, well, who am I to tell blank? Who am I to say blank? You're the owner of your story. Like I may not be an expert in anything I wrote about, but I'm an expert in my life and what I experienced and how I processed it and my own healing and my own perception. Like I am an expert in that. And that's who I am. The only person who could tell that story. And if it reaches one person and makes a difference for one person, it's worth it.
Like if we instead focused on not like, who am I to say this? I'm the only one who can tell this story. That shifts it into, hey, it's actually your responsibility to be able to share this with those who need it, because we are truly all living these journeys that are so different. Because a lot of it's our perspective, our emotions, the way we are actually going through it from our own sight, from our heart, from our mind. And that is what makes it so powerful when we're able to write from that angle. So as we wrap up here, just curious, now that you are like, the official pro author over here, do you have, and what would you say is just some of your, one or two pieces of advice that you give to people who want to start out, specifically with those who want to write a memoir?
Specifically with memoir, I think that number one, you need to be prepared for how excavating the process is. Because even if you think you've worked through stuff or what have you, like you didn't work through it this morning. And so who you are today, digging up things you haven't thought about for a long time and unearthing it can be really exhausting. And so just be prepared, have that little, safety pack in mind of sometimes the only energy I have is to grab a granola bar, or sometimes I need to sleep an extra 3 hours or take a nap or put the project away for a month. That's all okay. Like listen to what you need and take care of yourself, because it's hard. It's hard to flesh through our stuff and just to work through it and see it in honest ways. And I definitely did not I thought I knew my story. I'd lived it. I thought I knew it, but the different perspectives, the different perception, it really is like its own version of therapy.
Yeah. And there's something different about it being in a journal, but like as a journal entry versus what is going to serve pages of a book. It changes it, right? And it's so hard to describe it until someone actually goes through.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing I would say is just don't listen to what they say. Like those people, whoever they are, write every day, write in the morning, get up at 5 a.m. and write, get up an hour early, do this, do that. Don't listen to them. Figure out you. Like it comes back. It's the same piece of advice, but it looks different. Connect with yourself. You know what works for you and what's fine for you at your pacing. And that's really what writer's block is. It's not listening to yourself and knowing your pacing. Like it's all the things. Like just listen to yourself. Like trust you.
And if you don't know yet, because you're seriously at the beginning of your journey with this is your time to explore what does speak to you. Don't feel locked into one technique or one strategy if it doesn't seem to be producing results. I adore that. Well, Mae, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your journey here. It's been such a pleasure to have you on this. I just thank you so much for being part of the Soul Writer podcast, but then also the Burning Soul Press.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much. I love our connection and just everything about your mission and Burning Soul Press and everything.
Well, can you tell people how to best follow you in your continued journey?
My website, writingdayandmay.com. I blog there very randomly. But I keep like all workshop information and everything in that centralized place there. And then I'm most active on Instagram at Rainy Day and May.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another inspiring episode of the Soul Writer podcast. I hope today's conversation has ignited a newfound passion and determination in you to write from a place of vulnerability, authenticity, and soul. Remember, your story has the power to make a significant impact in the world. And by sharing your unique voice, you're contributing to the tapestry of human experience. So go forth, embrace your soul-driven purpose, and let your words transform the lives of your readers. Be sure to subscribe to the Soul Writer podcast so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes, where we'll continue to share valuable insights and inspiring stories from fellow authors. You can also join our community on social media to connect with like-minded writers and share your own journey by looking at Burning Soul Collective. Until next time, keep shining your light, and remember, your story matters. Your words have power. and the world needs the magic that only you can create. This is the Soul Writer Podcast, signing off for now. Right on, my friends.